Alright, so I've already invested a lot in this one WMA this year. There's a lot of water access public land around school, so I've been thinking about taking my boat up. But after I found this, it kind of put a dent in that plan, because I found a 55-inch solid, clean, typical 8-point shed. What is up, guys? Welcome back to 25 High. It's a dreary day today. That we got a big, well, a little bit of a temperature drop. Today is Tuesday, and Saturday was pretty much the exact same weather, where the temperature was just dropping all day, and then a little bit of drizzling rain, and then it's gonna quit, and then it's gonna be cold, and you know, stuff like that. It's kind of what today is. It's like a front or something pushing through. It's been drizzling all morning, and it's been stopped for a little while, but it's 54 degrees with about 80% humidity in the south, so it's really about 30 degrees if you know anything about hunting in the south. But either way, I've already seen some deer on the side of the road on my drive. I'm headed out to one of my favorite WMAs. It's finally something other than bow season. This week is muzzleloader season, so I got the old smoke pole in the back seat ready to rock. Well, it's not quite ready to rock. I still got to load it. Either way, I'm going into a spot where I found a massive shed, and I should have some video of it. But I measured this shed out to 55 inches on its own, which is, he looks like he would be between like 15 to 18 inches wide. I know that's a pretty big spread, but it's just one shed, so I don't know. It's hard to say exactly. So with that, by that calculations, that deer should be around 125 to 130 inches last year. So that, I've been just focused on that one little area. I've been doing a ton of map scouting there. I've walked around a couple drainages in the area. There's a lot of thick stuff around. I feel like it's about 50% luck and 50% just spending time in that area to try to kill this deer. But this is probably the biggest deer I've ever hunted, and the only for sure sign of his that I have is one shed. But I messaged Michael Perry on Facebook. Nice guy, and he's a killer. I mean, he knows what he's doing. I messaged him. I was like, when you find a big shed, like, what's your next step? And he's like, just get really familiar with that area, because if it's a really big buck and he dropped an antler there, he probably likes that area. So the spot I'm going today, it's a little more open than I'd like for bow hunting, so I'm glad I kind of gave that spot a rest since I scouted it, and going back in with a rifle or muzzleloader. Alright guys, I finally made it into my spot and got set up. I decided to sit on the ground because what I'm overlooking is just a really big bowl, and I'm like 50-60 yards over the military crest. Like, this bowl kind of all funnels down. There's a couple points. There's a point on either side of me that's real thick, young pines, and I can actually see so I got these two points of really young pines on either side of me. Right down below me is where I found that really big shed, and I basically just decided to come in here because it's like, it makes the most sense for that deer to be somewhere in this area based on the wind and what I've seen. The other drainage up over the ridge behind me and then back down, it's a lot more open and a lot more grassy, a lot more space between trees. This seems like it has a little bit more security cover maybe. I'm hoping that since it's got more fairly young oaks, maybe some of these trees are more palatable if they're still dropping red oaks. If not, I'm kind of just hoping this buck's cruising, or just getting ready to cruise. So I got a little trick up my sleeve. We'll start out with Native Sense War Party. This stuff
it's potent. Stuff falls out of trees all the time in the woods, so I'm not really worried about that. About making too much noise. Ooh, it's blowing right back at me. The wind's supposed to be blowing like right up the straw. I'll have to stand up for this. And then on this other one, I'm gonna do a little bit of both and try to just chunk it farther. Alright. Well, now my hands smell like a barnyard, but I'm hoping that's just far enough down. It's about, I threw them about halfway down this in this little bowl. This wind is kind of quartering back towards me now, but I'm hoping that somehow it'll carry, maybe when the winds calm down this evening, that'll kind of carry that scent up. There's a big thicket up there, ahead of me, kind of to my right, up this drainage that I think he really could be holding in. But, yeah, basically we're just overlooking this bowl, this drainage. Found a couple rubs in here about 2 weeks ago. And I'm really not hunting off a sign, I'm just hunting off of intuition right now. This is where I found that shed, and then I was going to keep going and try to get down in this bottom. But as soon as I crested this ridge and looked down into the bottom, it kind of clicked and it made sense. It's like, there's like this really nice military crest right here, and then right at the tip of this thick stuff, there's like a gully that goes down, and right at the tip of this thick stuff to my right is when that gully kind of flattens out. It makes it easy crossing right there. So, I don't know, it's pre-rut. It's muzzleloader season. And it's a big temperature swing, so even if we don't see that big buck, hoping we see something that gets me excited. Something that's worth dragging out of this hellhole. Alright, my camera angle might not be the best right here, but before I get fully set up, I'm gonna try to sound like a buck making a scrape. And then I'll give a little update. So, I did that because it's kind of loud. I don't want to, a couple reasons. I want to sound as natural as possible, because I might be really close to this buck's bed. So I kind of eased my way down to where I could see more of this bottom that buck I saw yesterday disappeared into. It may not be the best setup to see a lot, but I can see exactly where he came out of his bed. And I think, based on what I saw the rest of the evening, I saw a handful more deer. They were all working up this bottom. I'm assuming there's a hot feed tree or something up here, or else even with the good weather conditions, I don't know if I would have seen that buck. So I'm hoping they're still hitting it, hoping that buck's still in the area and I haven't blown him out. But I think he's bedded like just across this bottom in that clear cut. I'm just hoping that I didn't blow him out trying to get in here. While my wind's doing the exact same thing, temperature's almost exactly the same. Only difference is a lot less cloud cover. And the leaves are dry now. They're not soaking wet like they were yesterday. So I'm gonna try to make a couple more deer noises, trying to clear out a little spot to sit quietly. And then we're gonna see if we can't capitalize today. That's the biggest deer I've ever seen in person.
Guys, I literally feel sick right now. I know the footage wasn't great, but I had the biggest deer I've ever seen while hunting at about 50 yards today. And there was just too much brush to shoot through. He stepped out. Well, what happened was I thought I saw a limb moving in the wind and just put my binoculars up, not thinking about it. I thought I'd been hearing something over that direction, wasn't thinking about it, and just threw up my binoculars real quick, and there was a nice buck staring right at me. I couldn't really tell how big he was, but he was definitely something I would shoot. And we had about literally like a 5-6 minute stare down, and I watched his head just sort of like, it looked like he was losing me. Like I was just staring through the binoculars, and he was facing like eyes locked, and then his head just started drifting a little bit, and then his ears started moving a little bit. He flicked his tail, and then he turned around, and I put my binos down, turned the camera on, and then watched him for a second, and then I realized just how big he was. He was easily a 130 plus inch deer, and I let him calm down. He put his head down, he ate some acorns, sounded like he might have made a scrape. I kind of moved my gun over, got it. I had him in the scope at one point. I had the hammer cocked, finger on the trigger, crosshairs on his shoulder, and there was just, I couldn't quite tell how much brush was in the way. If I would have known it was just like a leaf or two that I would have to shoot through, I would have made the shot. If I would have had my rifle, probably would have made the shot. But it was just like the top of a little tree was like right on his back, and all I could see clearly was his head and his neck. And I didn't feel comfortable with that with a muzzleloader, especially a deer that big. So I was like, well, I was just like, you got time. He's calmed down. He's not looking at you anymore. All he's got to do is walk behind this pine, and then when he steps out there, he's in the wide open, and I can get a easy 50-yard chip shot. And I don't know how well the camera picked it up, but he gets behind that pine tree, and I'm just waiting on him to step out. I can hear him kind of walking. Like I say, when he was behind the tree, it sounded like he made a scrape. And then to back up, right before he went out of sight, I saw him pick his nose up like twice. And my wind had been blowing down this bottom, but I thought it was hanging high on the hillside that I was on, and he's down in the center of the bottom. Thought I was fine. But like I say, he picked his nose up a couple times, got behind the tree. I heard him made some noise, and I thought he sounded like he was walking, like about to step out behind the tree, and I just hear shoo. He blew one time and bounded off, and he didn't get out of there like super quick, like he didn't really know what he was smelling maybe. And I watched him bound out. As soon as he got out of sight, it looked like it sounded like he stopped, and then I heard him, I think he stopped and stayed dead still for 5-10 minutes, and then I thought I heard him walking again, and then I couldn't really tell, and then it just got dead quiet. The wind stopped, and the thermal just started dragging straight downhill. But I mean, it was broad daylight. It was 3:45 when I first saw him, and it was probably 4:05, 4:10 when he bounded out of there. So I gave it a few minutes, and as soon as this thermal switched, I was like, I can't risk blowing him out anymore. So I just eased my way out of there, got out early, and I've just been thinking ever since. And it's really tough to know what to do with a big buck like that. Like being that he didn't like blow out of there like crazy, like he didn't tear out like he was like hard spooked. He didn't do anything crazy. And because he showed up that early, like I know he's bedded in that area. And I think it's the same buck I saw yesterday that I also didn't get on camera and couldn't get on. I think it's the same buck, and if it is, then he was bedded about 100 yards from there yesterday. So he's probably gonna come back in there in the morning or the next couple days. So I'm kind of just contemplating in my mind, do I want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go back after him, or do I want to wait till Friday morning when I know I can get in there and he'll be a little more calm? I don't know. All I know is that is the biggest deer I've ever hunted in my life, and I'm almost positive it's the same buck as that shed I found. Like, it's just a monster buck. He looked like he might have been on one side when I was looking through the binos when he turned, it looked like he might have had an extra tine, like he grew another point. It was 9-10 point, just stud of a buck, giant. He looked like he weighed 200 pounds. His antlers were just ginormous. I don't know. I feel sick just because I would have probably rather have just shot and missed and just been like, well, I don't know if I'll ever get on that buck again, than have something like this happen where it leaves so many questions. I don't know what to do. But what makes me feel good is that he didn't just tear out of there. Like he literally bounded like almost like a mule deer straight uphill to a thicket and stopped. So I don't know. Like I say, I don't know if I'm going in the morning or Friday morning, tomorrow afternoon. What I do know is next time I go in there, I just got to play it a little safer, get in a better position maybe, try to get up a tree instead of sitting on the ground. I feel like now that I know more about what he's doing, I feel like it might be better to get in there in the morning, which is what I originally thought. But I don't know. He's a stud. He's a giant. And I don't know what to do.
Alright guys, well, as I've mentioned, I've got pictures and I've got experience with a really nice buck. You've seen all that. But I decided, since the wind is just swirling and it's hot and it's not good conditions, to sneak into close to where one's bedded, or at least not where he's bedded. It's not a good day to hunt there. Because of that, what I did was I scouted around a lot, and I'm basically waiting on the wind to blow to move at this point to make my final little jaunt over to where I'm gonna sit. But I scouted, I found a decent bit of sign. I saw the best sign that I found today was some really fresh tracks not far from some decently fresh rubs. And I was like, well, the habitat sets up really nice for at least a buck to be in this area. So basically what it is, off to my right, you can kind of see this ridge, probably about 50 yards away. So that comes up out of this bottom. There's a bunch of sign, like right where it hits, and there's an edge right there between thick pines and more open pines. And then there's a couple other little edges and little features on this side that make it seem like a deer would want to come up out of the bottom here, across the bottom, which is kind of like an observation set. But across the bottom, there's one patch straight across from me of really thick pines, and then there's a couple others like scattered throughout that other ridge on the other side of the bottom. What I'm hoping is, if I get in here without, I only gotta make it about 20-30 more yards. If I get settled in with nothing spooking too hard, I'll be sitting where I can see this whole big bowl of this bottom, all these ridges coming up to bedding and away from bedding, and should be a good setup to at least catch something slipping through. Even though it's 80 degrees, it is pre-rut, which means the rut should be kind of starting to kick in pretty quick, which means even though it is hot, it's still good. You never know what's gonna happen.
Alright guys, so it's technically the second day of the public land opposition. I've shown footage of let me just start at the beginning real quick. So back in November, the first muzzleloader hunt of Alabama. Let me back up a little bit more, sorry. So sometime during bow season, end of October, beginning of November, I went into this spot, looked really good from the road, looked really good on the maps, and immediately, like, I dropped down in this one bottom, found a huge shed. That fired me up. I was like, alright, I need to hunt. I need to start figuring this area out. I need to find this buck. The shed measured 55 inches by itself. I'm sure I've already shown footage of it. Then fast forward to the first muzzleloader hunt of the year in Alabama. I hunted, and just looking at the maps, it seemed like, looking at the maps, the wind direction, and what I had thought, it seemed like the best place to hunt was right next to where that shed was. So I ended up sitting no more than 40 or 50 yards away from where I had found it, and across this big creek bottom, I see a really nice deer. I couldn't tell how big he was, but I saw really long brow tines and a good mainframe 8 rack. Couldn't tell too much about it. I literally, I was like, oh, there's a deer, put my scope on it, and it was a little too far, a little bit too much brush. Turned my camera on, never saw it again. The very next day, I decided I'm gonna push the envelope just a little bit more, and I sneaked down. I was 50 yards in the other direction from where I found that shed, and I was a little bit closer to where I'd seen the deer the day before, and the exact same time, 3:45 in the afternoon, broad daylight, I caught a glimpse of some movement, put my binos up, and I'm in a stare down with a giant buck, just like that. He was 50 yards away before I even saw him. So we're in like a 5-minute stare down with me just holding up my binoculars like this. It was intense, and I couldn't tell much about him other than that he had really long brow tines, and he was definitely a buck that I would be happy to kill. Finally, he turns his head, and I realized, like, that's bigger than I thought. I put my binos down, get my gun over my camera, turn my camera on, the whole nine, and I get my scope on him. He hasn't moved by this point, but he's going back to feeding. I put my scope on him. I got the crosshairs on him, hammer cocked, but there's just a little bit too much brush in the way. He's 50 yards away from me. Looking at him through the scope, looking over my scope, I can tell this is like he looks like he's 200 freaking pounds down there. Just a giant rack, got just funky. So my whole plan for this week of hunting, this opposition public land part 2, was I'm going to hunt that deer every chance I get. Every time the wind's right, I'm going to sneak in there, and I should run into him. It's pre-rut. They're starting to get stupid. It should be perfect timing. So first 2 days, I do a lot of scouting, I do a lot of driving, I did a little squirrel hunting over on National Forest, and haven't taken anything too serious. Then this afternoon, which you guys, I don't know if you've seen this or not yet at this point in the video, but this afternoon, I went into some kind of random spot. I knew there were deer in the area, but it wasn't what I typically hunt, and I was just trying to do something different. It was wide open. It's like a 2-year-old clear cut. I think it got burned, and there's a little bit of tornado damage in there, and it's just this big creek bottom, and I was sitting kind of in a bowl, and I did some crazy rattling sequence. If you haven't already seen it, you will see it. And then within 5 minutes, I hear something break and run to me. It sounded like a tree falling down at first, and then I hear something like distinctly running, and it's like just grunting and running the whole way to me. And by the time it gets to where I think I can see it, it's just getting to that gray light. It's real overcast. It's just getting into gray light, and it's hard to see down into these bottoms. And I hear this deer run up to about 50 yards, and the way I set up, I could see this whole bowl, this whole creek bottom, and there was one tiny little gully where there was about a 10-yard strip I couldn't see. Sure enough, that deer runs right up to that. And I try to kind of make a move and get to where I could see him, and he kind of sort of spooked, but not really. He ended up blowing a couple times, but he only bounded off about 3 bounds and then stopped. And I put my binos on him, put my scope on him, everything, and I could see exactly where he ran to and stopped, and I heard him stop, and I saw him stop, and I couldn't see him. Couldn't tell what he was. But that fired me up. It got my hopes up. I'm like, these deer are really receptive to calling right now. It's like right at the beginning of rut, and the wind switching tomorrow. It'll be perfect to go in there. Well, I get to camp. I'm waiting on Kurt and his buddy Dustin. They both seen bucks. I'm waiting on them to get back to camp, and I'm just listening to a podcast, scrolling through Facebook, let my phone charge up. I see a post, and in the comments there is this picture right here, and my heart just sank. When I stepped out of the truck, I thought I was gonna puke. It was not a good feeling at all. And yeah, it kind of wrecked me, but at the same time, it's public land. I'm glad the guy got him, because now I'm not stressed about one particular buck. But oh my God, I cannot believe I had that deer at 50 yards and couldn't shoot. And my whole plan this whole time I'm gonna be here was focused on that buck, and now that just got thrown out of the water. But anyway, all you can do is get back in there. I've learned a lot this week, or this past 2 days. I've scouted this place a heck of a lot more than I have in the past. Got a lot more of an idea of what to do. So, all we gotta do is get back after it. But part of me is glad the story's over. Part of me still feels a little sick that I'm not the one who's got my hands on that deer. But anyway, just figured I'd give you guys an update. I wanted to share this story, so I guess now I get to. It's not the way I wanted it to end, but hey, somebody's really happy with that harvest. So either way, I gotta get in bed. Cade's gonna roll into camp any minute, and there's gonna be some bucks hit the ground, I promise. Maybe. No guarantees, but hopefully. Y'all stay tuned. Time for day 3.